cost of food has continued to strain households, leading to increased economic hardship and food insecurity. According to the NBS inflation report for February 2024, food inflation climbed to 37.92% on the back of higher average prices of items like bread and cereals, potatoes, yam, and other food items. This in response to the pressing issue. The federal government has been implementing various strategies and initiatives to address the challenges posed by food inflation and ensure food security for its citizens. But what are the underlying factors contributing to food inflation? Well, that's what we're about to find out. And for more perspective on this, I'm being joined by a researcher, an agribusiness economist, Dr. Matthew Ojo from the United Kingdom. Thank you so much, Dr. Ojo. It's really good to have you again this afternoon.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me, and good afternoon to our viewers at home.
Yes, I read the figures out now. 37%, 7.2%. That's what we have with regards to food inflation. But we've talked about this time and time again. Many would say it was expected considering the hike in the price of energy, fuel, diesel, and all of that, movement of farm produce from the rural to the urban areas. Some would think maybe this is ascribed to it, but can you break this down for us? What really is fueling Nigeria's food inflation figures, which continues to stay on the high side?
Okay, thanks once again, Tolu. I think it's pretty easy. It's not rocket science. When you look at food inflation in Nigeria, if you want to make it easy, just split it into two. You have inflation that is related to imported food, all right, and then you have the inflation associated with food commodities that were produced in Nigeria. For the ones that come from outside the country that are imported, that is usually driven or determined by the exchange rate. Okay, so for example, imported food inflation currently stands at 29.8%. But then if you look at the overall food inflation, like you mentioned, it's almost 38%. The other angle of it is inflation that is on the food commodities that we produce within the country. The one outside will affect crops like, or commodities like wheat, all right, oils that we import from outside the country, and any associated agricultural inputs that comes from outside the country, because those ones will eventually affect the price of whatever is being produced. So it's not surprising that you have cereals, you have bread, because wheat is imported. So any food item associated with wheat, whether your noodles, whether your pasta, whether your confectionaries, all those are likely to go up. And that is what we are seeing now. But for the commodities that are produced within the country, where you have your yam, for example, where you have your maize, some of them will produce, where you have your potato, the inflation associated with those ones are usually different by two factors, majorly. Okay, one has to do with seasonality, on and off season, whether it's available off season or is not available. That will affect the price that you get to buy those ones. Now, the other one, which is very important, is that which is associated with transportation. And if you read the NBS report on food inflation, you would have seen transportation itself mentioned. And that is because the recent announcement that has to do with subsidy removal was transferred immediately to transportation. Transportation cost has gone up, and so foods that are transported from the local to the urban area to market will, automatically go up. So you have these two bedeviling food prices in Nigeria, the one that comes from outside and the one that is within our own domain. Now, the question is, what could the government have done differently to help the situation? Please let me say this. The food inflation we're having now is still not the highest anyway we've had as a nation. Right? If you remember, in 2021, food inflation went as high as 39.5 something percent. Now, just a year before that, the year 2000, food inflation was at its lowest, minus 17.5%. So what has happened between then and now? Why are we not able to curtail at least the one that is within us, within the country? Because exchange rate is a little bit complex, if you like, to control. We don't have so much that we're exporting out of the country. And so we're always, at the other end or the lower end when it comes to exchange rate. The difference between when we had the highest food inflation in 2001 and now is that the exchange rate is not the same. As at then, $1 to naira was exchanging around 500, okay, in that region. Now we have over 1,000, as the case may be. So you see, the issue now is that people don't have enough to buy what they need, even when it's available. The value of the money they have has been depleted. So that is a double challenge or challenges that an average Nigerian is facing when it comes to food inflation. If you ask me, because it's not always the right to talk about the problem, the easiest way would have been when the government brought out the announcement of subsidy removal, and they talked about converting from fuel to gas for transportation. One would have thought that a massive program would have been organized for those involved in food transportation. If that is the only thing the government can do, like for all those of you involved in transporting food, this is the scheme we have for you. This is a discount we'll give you if you want to convert from fuel to gas, so that at least you would have addressed the issue of transportation to a level. Even if it will rise, it may not likely be at the rate we're having it now. The other part of it has to do with production. And I have said it before, when you are tackling food inflation, there are so many things to look at. You look at availability, you look at accessibility. Accessibility is what I've just explained now in terms of transportation. Availability is caused by so many things, whether it's driven rather by so many things. There might be people are not able to go to farm because of insecurity, for example, and that is what we're having now. However, what we could do, or what the government could do, is to see how we can start leveraging on urban agriculture. I've said this thing times without number. Can we have areas within the urban center, for example? You can look at a total of 5 hectares broken down into small areas within the city, and people can grow things. The technology for producing yam in sack is well established these days. You don't necessarily need to be in the rural area to produce yams. You don't necessarily need to be in the rural area to produce leafy vegetables, for example, tomatoes or fruit vegetables. These are the things we are not seeing, and that is why we are still grappling with high food prices currently.
All encompassing there, Doc. I must say, digging deep into the issues. But my next question, and I suppose you'll be expecting that question. Sometime last week, the central bank handed over fertilizers worth 100 billion naira to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. Now, lots of reactions have trailed this. Is the central bank supposed to be doing this? What is the central bank supposed to be supporting? But I want to ask you, what do you make of supports like this one? What impact are we expecting? And what other interventions do you see along the line impacting the food sector positively?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me tell you straight on. I'm not really expecting so much impact. That's the truth. I just say it as it is. You see, previous years we've had discussion on central bank doing all this in the agricultural sector. And whenever you ask for my reaction, I tell you, well, it's good, but it won't last. It won't last because these interventions are, however how well-intentioned they are not properly laid on a foundation that is meant to take us far. For example, the CBN gave out 2.1 million bags of fertilizer. Commendable. Based on what information? What drove that decision? It is estimated that we have around 50 million farmers as at 2021 September. That was federal government. Some other estimate says we have around 38 million. So if you take 50 million, for example, farmers in Nigeria, that's about quarter a bag of fertilizer for everybody. Or even if it is based on 38 million, how many bags will eventually get to farmers? That's one. Second, now, do you really have to go to give it to the Federal Ministry of Agriculture? Was there a planning? Was there an agreement? Was there a discussion to have warranted that? If there was, could we have used another means to get to the farmers? Would CBN have used their branches in states with collaboration with state government, state Ministry of Agriculture, and NGOs that are involved in the agricultural sector to ensure that the bags get to the farmers, no matter how small or limited they are? These are the things we always discuss, and that's a problem with us as a country. See, Tolu, let's say this straight on. In terms of agricultural land, okay, the FAO says, the Food and Agriculture Organization says Nigeria has about 70.8 million hectares of land that can be used for agricultural purposes. Out of these, we have 34 million that are arable land. That's the land that are currently cultivated. You have permanent crops just occupies around 1/5 of all of that. That's about 6.5 million hectares. The rest, 20-something million hectares, are just pasture land. So if you say you are giving 2.1 million bags of fertilizer at 100 billion naira, that's around 46 or 47,000 naira per bag. The question is, how will the federal government ensure, or the Federal Ministry of Agriculture ensure that it gets to farmers? I've always said this about the framework that we have currently in the agricultural sector in Nigeria. It won't work. You know why? Because you have a framework, all right, that makes state government to still behave as if agricultural sector is on the exclusive list, whereas it's on the concurrent list. You have a structure or a framework that is bedeviled by corruption and nepotism and bigmanism. How will it work? Okay, what happened to the e-wallet scheme brought into fertilizer distribution by Dr. Adesina when he was the Minister of Agriculture? It's no longer there, if it's operational at all. So you see, the framework that we have in Nigeria for the agricultural sector is not going to help a development that we expect, or the kind of development we expect in the nearest future. Okay, it's just like you are pouring a new wine into an old wine skin. You will lose the wine, you will lose this wine skin. We have to take a look as it is now. For goodness sake, why should state government still be behaving as if it is the federal government that will feed people in their states? I mean, you can commend the Niger state government, for example, with all the investment in getting tractors and mechanization and irrigation. 50,000 hectares of land for irrigation is not a small thing. It's a contribution towards that. But what is happening along other states? But let me tell you this. I don't blame states, however. I blame the federal government because the body language of the government does not speak to its intent to improve agriculture. I'm saying this.
Dr. Ojo, allow me to interject for a minute. Dr. Ojo, are you with me?
I'm here.
Yes, thank you so much. Sorry about that, but allow me to interject. I want to tell you that you mentioned Niger, and I want to also say that we see states partnering in recent times. Lagos is of taking from Niger and all of that. I'd like you to also react to that while you are making your point. Thank you.
Thank you. See, the issue of, I saw that products were produced for Lagos. Honestly, Tolu, that is not how sustainable. Lagos does not necessarily have to depend on Niger to produce for it. What is happening to Lagos? Why can't Lagos invest in urban agriculture, for goodness sake?
There's not enough land here.
Whatever is coming from other states will only be complementary. Okay? What I'm trying to say is that the body language of this government is not in consonance with the emergency food security emergency declared in June last year. By the mere fact that the budgetary allocation, I mentioned this last time I was on the program, was just 1.32%. So you can see state government also following suit, not budgeting enough for agriculture. So what's the way forward? I know you will ask this. The way forward is simple. That I expect the Minister of Agriculture to lead in all this. All right? Where is the plan? I keep on saying this, from that minister or ministry to transform the food situation of Nigeria in the next 2 years or 1 year, as the case may be. Okay? You have a framework that does not provide opportunity for even states to report on their progress. I will advise this. Let the minister begin a kind of, what do you call it, process, all right? Have a 3-day or 4-day, whatever seminar or workshop, called eggheads together in the country and said, look, I need you guys to come up with a new framework that will help Nigeria move from where we are now in terms of food to this point. And people will make suggestions, gather that together, transform the framework currently. You can't build on this structure. It won't work. What we are doing, we call it palliatives, all right? Let the African Development Bank pump money as it can into Nigerian agriculture. The way it is now, that framework will not support development. I'm sorry to say that.
Dr. Ojo, before I let you go, finally now, let's speak to storage. And when do we get to that point where we can really start to export? We see the NEPC and other export agencies of government working hard to meet up, to improve our export proceeds one way or the other. When do we get to that point, and how do we address storage issues?
Okay, when do we get to that point?
Yes, because
in my mind, it's going to be...
we are yet to feed ourselves as a nation.
Let me say this. You see, you want to first produce enough for your people, and then you now leverage on what to export. We are hungry. You want to export? I don't have a problem with that anyway. But you see, the only way we can improve export is when you have enough production. And enough production in the sense that you put your funds after proper planning. Unfortunately, again, this is a government whose body language does not seem to support data or statistics, okay? All right? When you have people glamorizing the mocking of data, it becomes disturbing. You need data to be able to improve or take decisions to improve production. And when your production improves, you want to see how much you can develop your export arm of things. So my own take is this. There's need for all those stakeholders in the agricultural sector to come together and then address this problem head on. We want to export, but before then, we want to feed our people. What do we need to do? How do we get there? And fashion a new roadmap, devoid of this lackadaisical attitude from the state governments, most of them, devoid of the nepotism you have currently, or the corruption that you have there. Without all this being addressed head on, we might just end up, just talking as we always do, without much progress.
It's always interesting having you on the show. I must thank you so much, Dr. Matthew Ojo. He is a researcher and also an agribusiness economist, joining us from the United Kingdom to understand food inflation and, of course, impact of food insecurity across the African continent. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Todo.